Welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and today I have 10 spooky recommendations for you. These reads have vampires, witches, and werewolves, and they range from middle grade to YA to adult to one manga recommendation that I am currently obsessed with. The reason why I have this list for you is because spooky season's just around the corner. We're all aware of it. Plus, I do have my own TBR Harvest video that's going to be coming out in a few weeks announcing my readathon for October. But even more importantly, it's only a couple weeks away, is the beginning of the Mystic Readathon. This is hosted by Nell from Nell Diamond, and it's inspired by The Vampire Diaries, a TV show I recall watching religiously and I'm still just a little bit obsessed with. But when you meet Nell, if you don't know who she is, you'll know that my obsession, it's small potatoes. She is genuinely the super fan of all super fans, and you can tell as soon as you watch her announcement video how much dedication she's put into it, how much work, energy, thought, and just love for the series. And I am so excited to be a part of it. I am one of the co-hosts for the human faction. There are 4 factions. You can either join my team, be a part of the humans. Everybody wants to be us, kill us, or get with us. So if that's your cup of tea, this is the team to be with. But there's also the witches faction, the vampire faction, as well as the werewolves faction. And maybe that's why I'm creating this list today, just to get you in the mood and be prepared for September if you're part of the readathon, or just in general whenever you watch this. If you are interested in participating in the Mystic Readathon, I'll make sure to have Nell's announcement video below, but that's not the only readathon that's happening right now. In September, there's another vampire readathon going on that I think that you should just be able to participate in both because they're both amazing, and that one is Slayer Fest. It is, of course, Buffy the Vampire Slayer themed, and that one is being hosted by Brittany from Rescues and Reads. So I definitely recommend you check both out, participate in both, especially if you really want to get amped up for the spooky season. Because I'm only recommending 10 books, we all know for a fact that there are way more options out there with vampires, witches, werewolves, and why not add the ghosts in too? But plus, be sure to check the description, not only for the various announcement videos I mentioned, but I know that Brittany Loves Reading has just done her own recommendations list for 5 vampire books. So if that is what you're into, definitely check that out. I'll have it linked below. And yeah, thanks in advance for the comments because I'm looking for recommendations too. Last but not least, if you weren't aware, I did hit 2,000 subscribers, and there's currently a community tab poll going on asking you all to put in your voice and vote on what celebration video I should do. There are 4 options, and I think that they're all really fun, interactive. Some of them are vlog focused, some of them will be sit down focused, so it's gonna be up to you. Whichever one wins the vote is the one I'm doing. All right, let's get to these recommendations. I figured I would get the manga recommendation out of the way first, and that is A Cat from Our World and The Forgotten Witch. I have read the first 2 volumes. I actually am not up to date in knowing whether there are more published in English or not, if it's an ongoing series, but I can tell you that this is quickly becoming one of my favorite cat manga ever. I absolutely adored the second volume, actually more than I liked the first one, mainly because we are seeing the ever-growing combination of characters, found family, different storylines, different motivations for all coming together, and it's lovely. I mean, there's a giant cat who has just found himself unintentionally, against his will, in this other realm, and he has been kind of forced, or he's expected to protect this witch with his life, and he's kind of like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. She's feeding me. I just want some belly rubs. Sounds good to me. And I really love it. And it's actually quite complex. There's a lot going on. And I also can say that this might be a fun one to try if you're participating in 30 and 30, a September readathon hosted by Shay from Shay Geeks Out. And there are 2 others. I know that Izzy from Happy For Now is a part of it, and there's one more, and I can't remember who it is, but I'll make sure to have their announcement video below too, if you're like a big manga reader. Oh, and obviously the reason why it's on this list is because she is a witch. The next book I'm recommending is Soulless by Gail Carriger. This is the first in yet another series. It is the Parasol Protectorate. There are 5 books in the main series. There's also a prequel. I'm not sure if it's a novella or not, but it's called Meet Cute, the Hedgehog Incident, if that intrigues you enough. And I've only read the first book in the series. I have the other 4 on my shelves, actually. The main character for this is Miss Alexia Terabody. She is a bit of an odd duck. within this Victorian society. And what's interesting about it is it's an alternate history paranormal mystery. We have Victorian England as it should be, but also the society has pretty much accepted that werewolves, vampires, ghouls, ghosts walk among us, and they must abide by English law just like everyone else. But then we start to see that vampires are appearing where they shouldn't, and also vampires, werewolves are disappearing at the same rate, and clearly there's something afoot. So Alexia Terabody and Lord Macon, the alpha werewolf of the London clan, have to work together and figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, Alexia has her own secret. She's preternatural, meaning that she's a human who is born without a soul, and so she wants to keep that close to the chest, not let others know that, because she could be in even more danger if they're aware of it. There's a little bit of a romantic subplot, so if you're into that kind of thing, I can't recommend it enough. The third book on my list is Alexis Hall's The Affair of the Mysterious Letter. This one I read last year for Get a Clue, and I am still obsessed with it. Yes, it has vampires and other strange creatures, paranormal, supernatural, fantastical, all wrapped in one. It's actually a fantasy mystery, and it's a Sherlockian reimagining. Our Sherlock Holmes is Scheherazade Haas, and she is just a troublemaker. She's a great character, and she doesn't really care which side of the law she's on, as long as she is getting what she needs to get done, completed. And the mystery at hand is that one of her ex-lovers is getting married, but she has received a very strange letter that seems threatening. It's also a bit ominous, and so oh my god. So Scheherazade, oh my god! So Ms. Haas So Scheherazade Haas and her John Watson character, John Wyndham, they pretty much have to start an investigation throughout the realms, the world that they're in, to figure out who is actually threatening her ex-lover. It's hilarious. It's got the perfect dry humor that you expect with characters that are just kind of trying to survive in this world. John Wyndham, no one understands why he's still alive, especially because he's hanging out with Ms. Haas so much. She's surprised that he's been able to continue living for so long, and you can definitely tell that the author is inspired and providing an homage to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, because there are so many elements that are true to form to the original narratives, even with this being so unique. The fourth book and last adult narrative on this list is actually the only one I don't own, and that is Carmilla. This is a classic. It's actually predating Dracula, so if you're a fan of Dracula, of any of the Dracula retellings, reimaginings that have existed, including A Dowry of Blood, then I can definitely recommend the prequel to that. It's not a prequel, but it definitely has existed prior to Dracula, and it follows the first vampire, which is a woman, which we love. The only caveat is that it's written by a man, and there have been some debates about what this is actually meant to represent. Fear of women actually being able to control their own lives, have agency, move about freely without men. There's also suggestion that it's a sapphic vampire novel as well, because there are two young women, one of them being a vampire, and their connection is quite deep, and so a lot of scholars interpret it as a prototypical lesbian relationship. This one, I would argue, is probably my least favorite on the list that I'm providing, but it is a staple, and if you're planning on reading Dracula this season, then I had to recommend that you maybe read Carmilla as well, if not before you read Dracula. This is also coming from someone who doesn't read classics, and there's only a couple that I keep on my shelves because I like them enough to do so. So when I say it's not my favorite on this list, that's very much because I'm not a classics reader. I have 3 middle grade reads on this list for those who want more of a spoopy season instead of a spooky season, and the first one I'll recommend is Garlic and the Vampire. There's also Garlic and the Witch, the sequel. These are juvenile graphic novels, and I'm telling you, every single adult that I've talked to who I've convinced to read this have adored it to bits. It is gorgeous. The illustrations are really lovely. It's so sentimental and sweet. There's found family, found friendship, and it's so wholesome. Plus, there's some really great, subtle LGBTQ plus representation, which I love to see in middle grade because we just don't see it enough. And I think that children need to be exposed to it earlier and show that it's normal, that it's fine, and we get to see it through vegetables that have been brought to life by a witch. The premise of the first story is that these vegetables are working away in the garden with their very loving witch, and they start to see smoke rising from up in the mountains, and they notice that a house, a castle that has been long vacant, is suddenly inhabited, and the witch says, the vampire must be back. All the vegetables, of course, are terrified, including our little garlic, but because of garlic's association with vampires, obviously garlic is being forced to go up the mountain and face the vampire by themselves, and it's very sweet, and I can't recommend it enough. Look how cute she is! The next middle grade option I'm providing should not be a surprise to anyone, especially if you participate in the amazing readathon. You probably will recognize the title, and that is Extra Normal by Kate Alice Marshall. This one provides such great representation for numerous reasons. One, we've got a band of children. All of them are siblings, but most of them are adoptive, something we don't see very often in middle grade. And we also have one of them being a ghost. One of them is also a werewolf, and the werewolf happens to be deaf too. And I find that really fascinating that all of his siblings know how to sign, and they accommodate him very naturally throughout the story. On top of the fact that this is a very spooky but kind of spoopy novel where these children just like work really hard and like try to support each other, try to save each other from the dastardly neighbors across the street. My final middle grade recommendation is No One Leaves the Castle by Christopher Healy. This also shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, or at least should be recognizable if you participated in Get a Clue last year, because this was also one of my host favorites for that, and I had such a ball with this one. Now, rather than witches, it more so has wizards, but I kind of argue that those terms are cousins of each other. Be sure to come at me or educate me on the difference, because I always kind of grew up that witches are women and wizards are men, and more often than not we are now seeing kind of the blending of those things. We also have the term warlock. They're all magical, they all do spells, some of them use wands. It's the same thing in my opinion. But this one is so wholesome, it's at a castle, and this is another genre blend. It's a fantasy mystery in which our two characters are a bounty hunter and a bard, and they just want to make a name for themselves. So they go to this castle with the intention of trying to find a lost heirloom, but a murder occurs, and suddenly the entire castle is shut down, and they need to solve the murder before what is around them begins to close in and crush the castle from the outside in, which is not a fun place to be in. So full of humor. It's very self-referential as well. We also have a lot of other magical creatures. An ogre is there, and there are a few other references to different beasts. So I can't recommend it enough. It's so good. The final 3 books on this list are YA, and before you click off, please give me a chance to try to convince you, because I'm not a YA reader either, but I do think that these 3 are strong YAs and they're great for different types of readers. So the first one is The Bone Spindle. This is the first book in a trilogy. All 3 books are officially out. I still need to read the 3rd book, the final ending, and that might have to be on my priority list for this September. But what's really lovely about this one is that it is a fairy tale retelling. It's also a gender flip on Sleeping Beauty. We, on top of that, have sapphic love here, which is a great representation, not between the 2 characters who are on the cover, but between the huntsman and a witch, hence why it's on this list. I really liked the inclusion of sapphic love, and it's so sweet. We also have the fact that Sleeping Beauty is a man. Meanwhile, the person who must break the spell is our woman, our scholar here, Fee. So really definitely check it out, especially if you're someone who loves retellings and wants to see more sapphic representation within YA books. 9th on this list is actually going to be an anthology that I read a couple years ago, and I really enjoyed the inclusion of so many different types of voices, different depictions, representation, and it actually happens to be a mix of fantasy and sci-fi. It definitely leans more fantasy than sci-fi, I would argue. There's a very small section of sci-fi books, space opera representations, and then we just have entirely fantastical short stories, and I think they're actually very well done. There are some that I absolutely adore, and they're the reason why I'm keeping this on my shelf, so I can reread those specific stories if I ever want to. But this anthology is called Reclaim the Stars, and to read the internal flap, it says, "From stories that take you to the stars, to stories that span into other times and realms, to stories set in the magical now, Reclaim the Stars takes the Latin American diaspora to places fantastical and out of this world." So what you can be sure of throughout this entire anthology is that we have Latin American voices, and on top of that we have a lot of inclusion of brujas, of werewolves, and of course aliens and everything else. There's of course a mermaid too, so maybe give it a shot if you're someone who wants to try out short stories, but you're a big fantasy sci-fi reader, and we just don't see enough of those. And finally, my host pick. I I'm recommending In Every Generation by Kendare Blake. I know! I just said that I am not a big YA reader, and yet my host choice to represent human faction is this YA paranormal reimagining, or like reboot, I should say, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have read all 3 books in this trilogy. You actually can see the other 2 right here, and I've given every single book 5 stars. My favorite one in the series is the second one, One Girl in All the World, and oh my gosh, I would really love to reread this series during September. Maybe I should do that. I can also recommend the audios for this. I have immersion read or leaned on audio for all 3, and the narrator does such a great job. This is a reboot, as I said, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but our main character is Frankie. She is a Slayer witch, and there are certain circumstances that have basically caused her to exist. She was a witch just trying to get through high school, and then suddenly a major event occurs in which they are beginning to wonder if all of the Slayers are gone, because suddenly Frankie now has the abilities of a Slayer on top of her witch abilities. So now they're trying to figure out actually who is behind this event. Are all of the Slayers gone? And if so, what does that mean for this new generation? In Every Generation, see the title there, for Frankie and her Scooby gang. Among the gang members include herself, who is a witch. We also have a werewolf. We have another kind of hardcore human who just wants to kick some ass, and it's just a great group of people. We also have the earlier generation, so you get to see Spike in these books. You also get to see the Red Witch, her mother, whose name is Willow. I don't know why I suddenly lost that for a second, but I just had such a good time. And that's coming from someone whose own experience comes from Angel, the spinoff, but I have actually kind of started the Buffy Vampire Slayer TV series now because this series made me want to go back and finally see what I was missing. And those are 10 books that I am recommending to you that either have witches, vampires, werewolves, or all of the above. And I think that they're all perfect for the fall season, whether you're looking for spoopy season or a spooky season. All right, thank you all so much, and thank you to my manor guests who continue to be such lovely people. You do a great job making sure the house staff aren't overwhelmed. You aren't calling and ringing the bell for the butler, for the maids too often, and you've only killed a few people. So I think we're doing a pretty good job. Okay, everybody, I hope that you are having a lovely reading month whenever you see this, and I also hope to see you in the next one. Bye!